This is Steve Baker, the voice of the Redhawks, and I want to thank our Miami IMG Sports Network flagship station, 1450 The Ticket, WMOH, and Bill Douglas for their help in producing this interview. I want to welcome in on the phone with me this afternoon Phil Steele, and one of the best analysts in college football in general, NFL, college football. He puts together some great magazines. He's going to talk today about the Phil Steele's College Football Preview, and it's a magazine that is on the stands now. I use it constantly, and Phil, I appreciate you taking some time with us here today.
Hey, it's a real pleasure talking football with you, Steve.
Let's talk about how you put your college football preview together, which, by the way, is in newsstands. If you haven't already got a copy and you want to know anything about any college football team, go pick it up. But, you know, when you're putting this thing together, obviously you have a great relation with so many coaches around the country that you can call up and they will sit there and talk with you.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of the magazine right now because the conversations I have are not a general conversation, you know, how's the team looking this year. I send them my team pages, which have every single player on the team listed, and then we go over every player on the roster. The conversations generally take about an hour each, and they get my guys in the right order. They give me great notes on each of the players, and I get a heck of a lot out of each and every conversation. I think you'll find that the two deeps in the magazine are extremely accurate, and we don't just give you one deep with the player's name and his height and weight. We tell you where he ranked coming out of high school, what he's done so far in college, and some strengths and weaknesses perhaps as well. So it's been something I've been working on. This is the 24th year of the magazine, and this year I actually talked to over 100 of the 130 coaches prior to the magazine going to the press.
Yeah, and the two deeps are one of the things that I really use the most, is especially in the opposition, being able to familiarize myself with the opponent. How do you keep it all straight? Obviously, you got a computer, and you're keeping all your notes straight with each coach. I would imagine through that way.
Yeah, and I also have a staff of 15 people that help me out here as well.
A lot.
You know, yeah, it's something that we start on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and we spend 6 months producing this magazine, and got the entire staff working out on it. So it's clearly not a one-man operation, or else it would probably take me 6 years to put out a magazine each year.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Miami Redhawks, and I know you've talked with Coach Martin, and he's done an outstanding job in rebuilding this program, although last year probably didn't live up to the expectations that everybody had, including Coach Martin. You picked Miami second in the East coming into this season, Phil. What impresses you, first of all, about Chuck Martin's Redhawks?
Well, the first thing that jumps out at you is just the overall experience level of this team. Taking you back to 2015, you know, Coach Martin used a lot of freshmen that year, and Miami took a few lumps in 15, going 3-9. Started out 16 really slow with a sophomore-laden group, and then rebounded to get to a bowl, and that had everybody's expectations raised last year. Mm-hmm. I think when Gus Ragland went out of the starting lineup for 3 games, that really hurt Ragland. Didn't have the same type of year he had in the bowl season, and Miami fell off to just missing out on a bowl at 5-7, even with some close losses. They had 4 net close losses, and what that means is take all your close wins, subtract off your close losses, and that's a net close loss. So they were basically 4 plays away last year from being a 9-3 team, and with all the experience level they have coming back, with Ragland at quarterback, Alonzo Smith at running back, and Kenny Young as well at running back, and then Gardner at receiver. This is a loaded team offensively, and I like the defense as well. So I think this year Miami lives up to the expectations everybody set for them prior to 17, provided they can stay healthier and then maybe win some of those close games.
And that's the key, I think, not only for Miami, but for every team across the country. And when you get to the Power 5, you got a little more experience on the depth chart. But really, if you can't stay healthy, you're not going to be successful in college football these days.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, you go back and look at, though, a lot of the analytics that I do shows that if teams get banged up one year, generally there's big-time improvement the next year, because what happens is you throw a lot of players in the lineup that weren't expected to play. You get the experienced players back. Now you've got more experience, and I think something like that can help Miami this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned the running game. You mentioned Alonzo and Kenny, and you know there's a couple of other guys. That is probably the deepest area on the offensive side for the Miami Redhawks, and I think the improved offensive line has to be something that you've looked at as well.
Yeah, and go back to last year, you know, the numbers weren't overly bad. In fact, they averaged 4 yards per carry, only allowed 21 sacks on the year, but you look at them up front, You got a guy like Tommy Doyle who went out after the first 4 starts at right tackle. He might be the best offensive lineman up there, and that was a big loss. In fact, they lost 2 starters off the offensive line early in the year. Now getting everybody back, and there's a lot of depth, a lot of guys who have been full-time starters on that offensive line. There's 7 guys coming back with starting experience this year.
Yeah, and Danny Godlewski is the center there that was injured early as well, and glad to see him back as well. Let's talk a little bit about the defensive side. You lose a guy like Heath Harding, and you're going to have to expect some younger guys to step up now.
Yeah, Heath Harding's a big loss, but I look at the overall secondary. I like the safeties, both guys back in DeAndre Montgomery and Joshua Allen. DeAndre Daniels at the 1 cornerback spot should be able to step in and become that top corner. I don't know if they're going to be quite as good without Harding in the secondary, but they're still going to be strong. And then you look at the front 7, Koenig and McMullen and linebacker, Costin up front on the defensive line. I think there's the potential there for Miami to have a pretty good defense this year. And last year's defense only allowed 24.1 points per game, so that's pretty good in today's hurry-up offensive era.
I mentioned you picked Miami to finish second in the East Division, and it should be a very good battle of the bricks this year as you pick the Bobcats to win the East. And always competitive between those two schools, but this season that game could mean an awful lot when it comes to the championship game.
Yeah, Miami gets it at home. That's a nice positive to have. It's on a Wednesday night, so fans should be pumped up for it, and Ohio's going to be coming in off a Thursday game, so they're on a little bit of a short week, and I think it's going to be the battle in the MAC East this year. I know Akron won it last year, but I think the 2 most talented teams in the East are clearly Miami and Ohio.
Yeah, Ohio you picked first, Miami second, Buffalo third, and Lance Leipold has done an outstanding job up there. Akron follows actually in the same spot as Buffalo. You pick them both third, then Bowling Green and Kent State. In the West, Northern Illinois and Toledo, again, you have them battling it out for the title on the West side.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Northern, they actually had themselves a couple of down years. Very unusual for them not to make it and not to win the MAC West, but they haven't done it the last 2 years. But this year, they sure look like the potential's there for them to get back to winning the MAC West. They've got Childers. They were a different offense once he took over a quarterback last year. You look at them up front, that's a veteran offensive line. They've got back their Marcus Jones at running back, and then defensively, my number 19 rated defensive line in the country, led by a first-team All-American defensive end in Sutton Smith. And I think with all the attention you're going to see on Sutton Smith this year, watch out for Josh Corcoran to break through and have a big year on the other side of the ball. So they're going to have a dynamic pass rush. They get the big game at home against Toledo. They get Ohio at home this year. In fact, you look at the road schedule they have in the MAC, or the Western Michigan one is probably the toughest one at the end of the season. I think Northern's got the best shot at getting there. And then how about the job Jason Candle's doing at Toledo? Finally breaking through and getting them to the MAC title game and a MAC victory. It's been a while for that. They've got excellent special teams. The receiving corps is loaded with guys that have had 1,000-yard seasons. So this is a very good Toledo team. I just didn't pick them there because they do play Northern Illinois on the road on a Wednesday.
Right. Competitive, as always, in the Mid-American Conference. Mentioned Ohio in the East and Miami. What will it take? What do you see? Obviously, staying healthy is a big part of it. But what are the keys for Miami on throughout the entire season to get them to that championship game and onto a bowl?
I would have to say November 7th is probably going to be the key, because when I look at the schedule this year, if Miami can get past Akron's coming off a bye. That game is on the road. I do think Miami's a little more talented than Akron is this year. If they can pick that one up, that's big. And then the second big chip would be that Ohio game on November the 7th, because that, of course, you would hold the tiebreaker with the victory. And right now, I've got Ohio a slight favorite in that game, but very slight. So it's a game where if Miami picks that one up, odds are they're back in the MAC or get to the MAC championship game.
And Phil, I do want to ask you about the preseason MAC teams. And again, you do this for all the conferences, but let's talk about the preseason Mid-American Conference teams, particularly Miami. In the third-team offense, you've got Gus Ragland in there. Also Jordan Rigg, one of the linemen, Nate Becker, a tight end, and Redhawks well represented. But you go into a first, second, third, and fourth team all across the line. And, I would imagine, given the level of talent, at least at the Mid-American Conference, it's a little tough to kind of pick and choose at times who goes where.
Yeah, it sure is. And, you look at the MAC, and I think the MAC has had great resurgence, these last few years. And you're looking at a lot of bowl-caliber teams coming out of the MAC each year. Love the talent. And, you take a look at a first-team wide receiver like James Gardner. He's a guy with great size, a great catch radius. He's got NFL potential. 6'4", 216, had nearly 1,000 yards last year, averaged almost 20 yards per catch, and makes first-team all-conference. So that just goes to show you the level of player, like an Anthony Johnson out of Buffalo. Nathan Rourke has NFL scouts looking at him. I can tell you from talking to the NFL scouts, they do check out the MAC on a weekly basis.
Junior McMullen, who will be one of Miami's representatives at the MAC Media Day coming up in just a week or so, is also on the team, on the third team, along with Brad Koenig, the other linebacker. And, when you take a look at this, you mentioned picking the teams and the competitive and the type of player that is in the Mid-American Conference. This conference is getting better and better and is getting more and more respect when it comes to every time you walk into a Power 5 stadium for these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in fact, this year, I think a team like Ohio has an opportunity to maybe contend for that Group of 5 bid, much like Western Michigan did just a few short years ago. Western Michigan got the big New Year's Day 6 Group of 5 bowl bid. So I think the MAC gets plenty of respect from the other conferences out there.
Well, hopefully it'll be Miami that'll be battling for that position, and not the Bobcats. We'll take that as well. Phil, I appreciate you taking your time and spending a few moments with us here. It's always fun to talk to you. And again, if you haven't picked it up already, if you're a fan of college football at all, make sure you pick up Phil Steele's College Football Preview. It's a great read and gives you so much perspective on each team. And as I said, I use it all the time, Phil.
I appreciate it. It's always good talking football with you, Steve, and enjoy listening to your broadcast.
Thank you so much, Phil.